Okay, hello everyone. We have a new version of Zoom, so I'm getting a little used to it on my computer. Welcome and thank you so much for tuning in to an article and an app. Today we're going to be talking about effective prompt writing for AI integration in education. Before we get too far in our discussion today, please just keep in mind a little bit of reading club etiquette. We do like for everyone to remain muted until you're ready to talk, but we do want you to talk and we do want you to share your thoughts and your experiences. Questions or comments, please always use the chat. Always feel free to unmute as well. We are recording this session so that it can be viewed from those who are unable to make it and also for further reference. So you always have access to this session. And the slides and the recording will be available in the PD to go newsletter. Again, welcome. And this is a collaboration between the Light Center Professional Development Department and the Light Center Library Department. Many of you know our Digital Resource Center, now Director, Jody Crawford. She's amazing. So we are collaborating with her to bring you valuable research and hopefully insights into steps that we can take. Our aim is to share at least one article and at least one app or more, or talk about apps and talk about technology as we will today in this engaging series as part of our 2024 professional development initiatives. Please definitely also, if you are here, I'm going to go ahead and pop the chat into the, pop the survey into the chat. I haven't had enough coffee this morning here. Pop the survey into the chat for you. Please do complete that. You can go ahead and open that survey now, complete it at the end of the hour. Let us know your thoughts on this series. And as always, please keep in mind that your feedback is invaluable to us and your engagement is greatly appreciated. So, who's here today? We have a small group, but I'm ready to engage in some thoughts and ideas. You can unmute yourself or you can pop some details into the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself. My name is Joni Mitchell. I am the Professional Development Specialist in the Light Center, the Professional Development Department. I've been with Westcliff since 2023, end of August. Oh, it's right there on the slide. August of 2023. So please do introduce yourselves, get to know each other. I do want to jump right into this article because hopefully you liked it and enjoyed it. And in case you don't have the article handy or you want to go back and review it, I'm going to go ahead and pop the article right there into the chat as well. So any thoughts on the article? Any thoughts on the questions there? Dr. Johnson, I see you.
Yeah, are they promoting? When I read this, are they promoting their own products? Because when you look at the abstract, it looks like okay, where it's almost like an advertisement.
I felt like not necessarily an advertisement. I see what you're saying though. The tone was very like I feel like they're just really really pro AI.
Yeah, there
So
was
that was
nothing
one of the
objective about this. This was a
well
this
they
is
did talk
some
about ethical considerations, but yes, you're right. They were very
really
pro AI. It did
really
not hide it. So yes, those of you if you haven't had a chance to read the article, please do go back and take a look. These researchers are I actually looked them up at one point a few weeks ago. They're from Australia. I don't have it in front of me in my notes. The department that they work in, they are very passionate about AI and using AI in higher ed. And I think yeah, like Dr. Johnson said, almost to a degree where it felt like they were kind of really advertising, like, "Hey, we should be using AI." And I don't disagree with some of their context in terms of
the word ethic or ethical
yes,
occurred one time in the introduction. That was it.
they. Oh, that is a good observation. Let's look at that. They have some. Oh, Oh, you know what? Actually, I was also looking at some of their references. That was the other thing I liked about this article was some of the references. Actually, if you actually go down, the references were in some of the regards better. They were more thinking of considerations in terms of privacy. They did talk a little bit about the challenges more so than solutions. I think that maybe is even a sign of the times. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you all think. Happy Tuesday, Dr. Constant. Thank you for popping into the chat there. Just kind of going over some, early thoughts on your article. Any you may have. Dr. Johnson said it felt like an advertisement,
Yeah,
like he was
there's
being
nothing
sold
objective
something.
about this whatsoever.
Have you found any objective research on AI up to this point? Because I find that's one of the biggest challenges with this topic.
Well,
It
what
tends to
happens is it
be.
seems like we always it's there's a certain degree that it reminds me of politics today, where
Mm,
liberals such as former liberals such as myself, or if we don't agree with the orthodoxy, we're getting pushed to the right, we're really not. And it's like with this particular subject, it seems that I'm not an anti-tech, but when I hear these, when I read articles like this, I'm like, there's no consideration for the downside, or how do we police this? How do we address this? So you get labeled anti-tech, and I'm like, no, 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 no. And that's kind of like what this article represents, like so many of our professors that are gung ho on it, but nobody wants to think of the ramifications. Nobody wants to think of the ethical considerations associated with it. That's what this felt like.
that's interesting. Did anybody else get that feeling? I think I have a different approach because and the analogy of politics is really good because I do the same thing with politics. I will isolate, like, okay, we're only going to talk about this perspective. Like, my sister actually is also a scholar, actually much far very accomplished scholar, and she'll say you're being very Pollyanna about this research, and I'm not. It's just that I like to isolate and focus on one perspective because then I don't have to think about how flawed that perspective is, right? And that's it's a very intentional decision. I'm not doing it to be naive. I'm not naive. But yeah, there were some limited, ethical considerations they had in terms of like information sharing, but it was not extensive. And that, maybe that's what we need, is we need to kind of flip it in one of our future reading clubs and look at some of the more gung-ho ethical conversations, around conversations around ethics or considerations that are being made. Anything else? So one thing the article did do is it talked about some techniques for, um, obviously writing prompts, and that's what I wanted to make sure that we kind of got to today. A lot of faculty have asked for, well, how do you get into AI? How do you, especially some of our faculty who are really opposed to AI, they know that students are using it to copy and paste and cheat. They're really
See, let me
opposed to
interrupt
it.
you right then.
Yeah,
Immediately,
sure.
your default was they're opposed to AI. See,
Oh no,
that's
I,
exactly the problem. That's that.
yeah,
Are they really opposed to it, or just the
yeah,
fact that all the negative consequences that come with it? Because
I
that's like
literally,
saying I'm negative. I'm negative telephone.
yeah. I've actually talked to faculty members who have, and mind you, the two of them have not been at Westcliff, but I've actually had conversations where people think it's going to die and go away because they know the history and they know about like AI winter, right? If you, anybody who is in here that's in COTE, you can explain it a lot better than me. But this is just some of the research. Like they think it's going to be so flawed that it's going to die down and people are going to stop. Students are going to like stop trying to use it, and there is it's a small group of people I've talked to that think that way, but the opposition is real. I don't want to open it. But I also have a handful of faculty, you're right, I could choose my words more carefully, who are careful and want to be intentional, who are worried. I think worry is a word that's pretty fair to use. And they do want to know how to use it. And so that was, again, the whole basis around, can we talk about prompt writing? So when it comes to like key techniques that they talked about a few different techniques. We're going to talk about our own techniques. I will share some of mine. Some of them were talked about in this article, and I'll also share some resources when it comes to prompt writing, because I think that, not to I want to sound like I'm hating on the article, but because I actually like the article, uh, I will say that it was pretty limited in its direct application. And I think that there's a lot of educators right now who are really looking to expand on this conversation about how do we use AI, how do we, so this is just one article. It's one tiny, tiny slice of what people are doing. But how can the techniques either in the article or maybe techniques you've used enhance AI's ability to provide personalized feedback, adaptive learning pathways? Those were really the two main areas that they talked about, using it for personalized feedback and adaptive learning pathways. Any thoughts on that? Oh, sorry. Yes, somebody just asked me for the link. I shared it at the top of the hour. I forget that people cannot see the previous. Zoom used to let you pin pin things here. Sorry about that. So that is the article there in the chat. So you don't have to go looking for it in the They also identified some skills that they were hoping to kind of, that they feel are industry, that are relevant in industry that they were trying to kind of get at with their research. So if you actually,
I mean, Gemini is the one that makes everybody African American.
Does it? I didn't hear that. I
You
heard it
haven't seen
uses it.
that? Just
No, I.
just do it. Google Gemini, Google Gemini and George Washington image.
Oh, it made George Washington. What happened?
Yeah, I'm in the hallway here. We have no place for professors, so it's I don't have. I'm literally doing this when I got my computer on my left hand. I'm
Oh,
typing with
okay,
my
no problem.
right.
I'll
So
find it.
Dr. Johnson is like Dr. Signoff's office not available?
It's always locked.
Oh, it's locked. I heard that campus was closed because of the air conditioning.
Yeah, the
Well, I
electricity
walked
issue.
in. I mean, nobody told me. I just walked in and right when the meeting started,
And there's more people there, Dr. Johnson?
there were a bunch of people here. It seems
Oh wow, okay.
half full.
They they
They probably.
canceled they
When
they
did they do
canceled
this?
well, they canceled
Yesterday.
classes and put them online again
When did they do this?
this morning.
What what time?
Yep, hold on, I'll get the email for you, Dr. Johnson. Give me a sec.
I saw something about it yesterday.
Joni, so for me, in terms of it's not specifically the personalized feedback and adaptive learning pathways. For me, it's allowing us to generate as instructors learning options, learning assignment options, making things that are, for a big thing for me, it was about having that alignment between the CLO and potentially what the learning goal or the topic is for the week and the assignment, and really allowing us to generate these things in a much quicker fashion than we can do on our own. You know what I mean? Because like when you're really trying to be creative about coming up with activities and assignments, or even if it's just especially with the Westcliff classes and just that live teaching component, I think oftentimes we get stuck in a rut, or we need, and Dr. Constant, I'm gonna pull from what you've said in the past for this, like we steal ideas from other people's lesson plans to be creative, right? Because it takes so long to come up with these things.
We're thieves. Teachers are the
Yes,
best thieves.
exactly. I just couldn't remember your direct quote. So thank you for that. It enables us to come up with things that are creative more quickly. And also oftentimes it can be difficult to align what you want to do with what the goals of the course are, because you're like, oh my gosh, there's this new piece of technology, or I really love this idea, but how the hell do I align it with what needs to be aligned with? So I've been doing this for teaching. I do, because I'm an instructional designer here at Westcliff, so I don't teach for Westcliff anymore, but I've been doing this for courses I design outside of Westcliff, and it's really enabled me to come up with, to make sure that things are all aligned from the top down, and to also come up with more creative assignments for my students. But what I really liked about this article was like, I'm learning how to do the prompts kind of on my own, and having this as like a blueprint helps me to help figure out how to get, for example, ChatGPT to give me what I want, because sometimes it gives me something close to it, but it's repetitive or it's a little off the mark, and I have to like figure out how to, like, you're basically training it to give you what you want, and having guidance in the prompt writing can help me to be more efficient and not get as so frustrated as I can when I'm like, stop giving me the same damn thing. Like, please stop.
Stop giving me this beautiful flowery language.
No, it's just that stop giving me the same ideas.
The
You know
same
what I mean?
ideas.
Like,
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
something different.
absolutely.
This is repetitive.
Absolutely. It can be very repetitive. I couldn't find before thank you, Dr. Brody. I'm going to come back to what you just shared there too. I couldn't find the article on Gemini. However, I will say I did see one where Gemini was pulling news information from the Onion, right?
If
And
you let me
to
share a
me,
screen, I'll show you.
oh, sure. Let me stop share. I think you should have permission to. You able to?
When I tried to, it wouldn't let me. It says,
It says it's not.
okay, now it will.
Let me
Now it
see.
will.
Who can share? Should be everybody. There we go. Media, Breitbart. So where
You,
is there an article on
you
this or
can't see
anything?
this?
Or
Can you see
yeah,
the
I guess
picture?
I can see the
All I did was,
picture.
yeah, this is what happened when people were putting an image George Washington on Gemini, and it did this for everybody. Napoleon Bonaparte, you name it. This is what the image was for. Absolutely everybody. It was a big stink about it. I'm sure I'm
I
not the
would
only
love
one
to
that heard about
find
this.
no, yeah, I would love to find the original article. So I saved these articles just for your reference. I'm kind of geeked out on this a little bit myself. And I do save a lot of these articles. I do have one where it talks about the way that ChatGPT or not ChatGPT, Gemini was using the Onion. So I save these articles so that I can send snippets to my students and I can show them like the machine is not, it's still artificial intelligence, right? It's just as a warning. It's not even to say like don't use it, it's terrible. It's just being able to say like be careful with it, right? What parameters are we going to put around it? And that was one of, I think it was one of the tips in the article. It's
But
one I'm going to
just
share with
like the
you.
article, they're not the if there was any source that is as erroneous as ChatGPT, as the fact that I think they call it hallucinates, literally makes up stuff, admits. I actually have threads in here where it admits it lied. We would never consider it. I mean, they don't even allow Wikipedia in high schools here, and yet we use this source on it, and it's frustrating because it has a lot of. I think everybody can see there has so much potential,
Right.
but you have a lot of, especially in academia, they're jumping on it full bore. You know, one of the administrators here, in fact, made a comment about she envisions this replacing professors. So it's you have this, and
Okay.
that's
Think you have
somebody
to worry
higher up
about
in the
that.
food chain than that. So you have this
That's nice.
imagery about what they want to do with it. Nobody, and they're not, these same people aren't considering the ethical implications from it, nor
Yeah.
the fact that how often it's just wrong and makes stuff up. So it's frustrating. I'm not a techie, so I don't understand that. I don't understand why
Right.
it literally lied to me and admitted to lie to me because it doesn't have any shame. It's a program. You know, I know
Well,
where it's whatever the programming is on that. I mean, I get that, but it's
yeah.
to how to use this responsibly because I again the potential in it is tremendous.
There is tremendous potential, and I think so one of the courses we're going to be launching, not a little bit of a shameless plug but not really, is a lot of the research that I've been working with some outside researchers from other campuses that I work at who are looking into this and how we can use it in specifically in the social sciences. And this is a really great example for me, which is why I want the original article because we do something a little bit different with it, where we look at, you know, bias in the image and where does it come from. So I'd be very curious to see where that instance comes from, when Gemini started doing that. I tend to find the opposite is true. I tend to find that when I put in DALL-E, which is ChatGPT's image generator, for anybody who doesn't know, successful businessman, it almost always gives me a white male. Like I'm saying man, so that's fine. Or successful, you know, or police officer, right? Like it's, we can see the bias in the images. So that's why this has distracted me and I'm really interested in it. But I think one of the things we want to think about in education, and maybe there is potential here for why we do want to jump on this. And I sound like an advocate. I feel like an advocate sometimes, but I'm really not. For people who don't want to use it, um, that is a personal choice. Uh, but for me, like we need to be at the forefront of this in education. We need to understand this because society has accepted it, and and we are creating the next generations of not just employees, but developers, designers, engineers, financiers, all the people involved in this technology. As educators, we are creating. I don't know about that whole, we're going to get replaced as professors, but I want to bring it back because what Dr. Broding was also saying is really so good, and it applies to this second question here. How do you envision integrating AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini into your current teaching practices to complement and enhance student learning experiences? I put some quotes on the end there. I may have pulled that from the article here, but I think that's a great example of what we can do. And I'm going to share with you some things that some other educators are doing as well. Any other thoughts on this slide? The issue is it's replacing critically thinking. Yeah, we don't want it to. That's what we need it to not do. Glad you said that. That's my next slide. Great segue. So, as this is where I'm coming to you all, how have you used AI? Dr. Broding gave us some great examples. What are some of your best practices? What has failed or not gone so well? I've had some failures while I've been playing with these tools. How do you balance human judgment with the text and the images created? This is such an important step. How do you make sure that Gen AI complements rather than replaces insights, critical thinking, personal touches into what you want to generate? How are we doing it? And the reason why I think it's important that we be able to do it is because then we can hopefully teach our students how to do it better, because we know they're going to be using it, right? Whether it's in a class that requires it or not. It is replacing writing skills. I actually have a very good colleague who does college admissions, and she said she's never read so many beautiful applications it's with the last year or two, year and a half. So yeah, it's definitely replacing writing skills. Just going over to the chat. Let's see. Thank you, Dr. Broding. Gemini woke AI image. Interesting. I'm gonna actually test that. They probably fixed it by now. And thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we need those writing skills. We need our students to be, and that's actually been, I don't know if this is something that is challenged you all, but one challenge to me is I have students who are coming back because now they really do use the word highlights like every 5 seconds. And I know because we've done live writing and I could see it, I mean, I guess it technically could be copying and pasting, but not the way the text goes on the page. But it's starting to change how we communicate, right? And I'm seeing it with my students. And the only way I've even noticed it is because I use it quite a bit. I developed an awareness of it. So I think it speaks to like the need to be able to use it. But what have you done? What have you tried? What has bombed? Or are you feeling kind of lost? Again, not opposed to it, just not engaged with it. I think that's an important distinction. I actually wrote that down because I think that's an important distinction. Getting some comments. Tried using it as a master librarian. Can you unmute and tell us how that went, Dr. Johnson? I think
Well, I'm trying to figure out how best to help me find sources on stuff, because to try to cut down on the time. That way, when you use even the Learn library, it can be a bit tedious, even for people who are good at it. And if I can find something that can help me find good sources, that would be great. But it's been frustrating because they've given me a bunch of articles that don't exist.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating part of it. And I believe that's those who believe it's going to just go away. It's because of things like that, where in a sense it becomes more harm than good.
Right.
And that, I can't use this. I can't depend on it. All it would take would be for some professor, for instance, to do a announcement saying, and according to Jorgensen's article, and then somebody points out that doesn't exist and ruin the reputation of that individual, to in a sense backfire on them. So it's still in its infancy, but there are too many and we can't dismiss the negatives, because there is no source that we would accept that's as wrong as this source is. And yet we put up with it because it's new tech, it's the shiny new object.
So I don't want to dominate the conversation. So if anybody else wants to jump in, please tell me. But I love this topic. For me, I will tell my students it's not a source. I don't actually let them call it a source. I don't let them list it as a source. I don't care what APA says. Um, we have to be able to take information and read it and use it and then write it on our own. I don't know how well that's going. Maybe I should start teaching them the other way. But as of right now, I don't like them listing it as a source because sometimes it's the only one they're using. And to me, it is a tool like spell check, like Grammarly, which is now powered by AI, like your PowerPoint presentation slide deck, which is also powered by AI for graphics and images and whatnot. Um, it is a tool for me. So that's one thing. I will not allow them to use it as a source of information. Now, as that tool, can they help them search? And this is something that we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. When it came to your master librarian attempt, how specific were you? Did you say only give me sources that are actual sources or ones I can actually find?
I get asked for peer-reviewed sources,
Interesting. And it still gave you
and
fake
it gave me some good ones, but it also gave me stuff that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I ask it, I said, "You made this up. You lied to me, didn't you?" And it's like, "Yes."
Does it
Like,
apologize
okay.
though? Mine apologizes. My
It's
chat
like your
GPT
2-year-old that doesn't know enough to
apologizes.
lie yet. It just thinks it's just going to get away with it.
I always say, I tell my students it's like a bad customer service agent. When you call customer service at the bank and they just tell you, "Oh yeah, no, you can do that, no problem." Yeah, no, you can't. They lied. They wanted to get to the next call. They were making you feel good. That's happened to me multiple times. Professor Murray says, "I regard AI as just another subject matter expert." That's a great way of putting it. That can be incomplete or incorrect, like any other SME. Check with their work. Check their work. Challenge it. I feel like we are the people they need in the room to challenge it. I'm on the Reddit threads. I'm reading about some individuals who will convince ChatGPT that or give it orders to add 2 + 2 as 5, and then test it the next day and test it the next day and test it the next day to make sure that it's still doing that for them. And that's, you have to wonder, what is that doing to the algorithm? What is that doing to um, the you know the tool itself? And then, not to go all sci-fi on you, but do we want it correcting that guy? Do we want the chat GPT that says, "No, I'm not going to tell you it's 5 today because I know it's 4"?
Well,
Anyway,
imagine when we
that's my
get one
sci-fi.
that's written by an organization or group that doesn't have a agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gemini clearly did, and most of them, ChatGPT clearly does.
Woke Gemini.
So it'd
Wow.
be interesting to find that more neutral, you know, uh, group that does the program. Again, I'm not a tech person, but it's clearly bent on whoever is doing the programming for it.
Right. Um, just looking at the article there. If you haven't opened the one that Dr. Broding sent, I wanted to see if they had the background on why
By the way,
somebody would look at that.
I had a meeting with the folks at Grammarly,
You
and
did.
I've got another meeting with them, and I got to sign a bunch of NDIs on. And they're it's interesting because the people that I spoke to are also adjunct teachers, so they get it. I mean, they get their frustration, because I had mentioned that, gosh, I was at one school that the university provided Grammarly for the students, but I said it can't. Unfortunately, the detectors can't distinguish the difference. It just says it was AI written,
AI.
so it can't tell whether or not who wrote it. And
Yeah.
they were completely on par with this, and they're going to be rolling out more tools. And I did volunteer Westcliff. I said, we're the perfect guinea pigs for this stuff. We got people who are more than willing to give good feedback on this from student standpoint. I mentioned the international footprint that we have from the professor standpoint, that we would be more than willing to help out. We're also large enough that we have a large breadth and scope as far as the opinions, abstracts, and things like that. So
Right.
he was interested in it. I know that Thomas is also involved, and so is Dr. Iverson. And I mentioned that both of them are great people, but all three of us would have different questions.
Absolutely.
And they really appreciate that made sense to them. So, they'll let me know when the presentation goes on for me to see what would entail, and what I can share and what I can't share. But the idea is that it will take. I know that it will require students initial writing, and then it has, like
Mhm.
the best way to describe this, and I'm sure, I'm looking at everybody here, like Mary, when you read a student's paper, my guess is by the third paper, you know who wrote it without even reading, the title, right? I mean, because you can tell that style, that cadence, and so forth. And that's why if something else happens, it kind of sticks out, like, huh? Like this doesn't sound like it. Well, apparently, there's going to be an element where they have to have some writing input, so then it can tell whether or not this person wrote it. There's originality to, that a layer to it that would be distinct from it, and would even be separated AI detector wise. So so they clearly understand the predicament. We would love them to use it, but we can't tell the difference between Grammarly wrote versus ChatGPT wrote.
Right. Right.
And but it was comforting to know that these are people who are professors that understand our predicament.
That's very helpful. Let us know in the Light Center if we can help with that in any way. I mean, as they roll things out, like we want to be able to provide faculty with information, you know, when it comes to these tools, when it comes to, using these tools, when it comes to the opportunities with these tools. We're really trying to encourage um, awareness around every aspect of AI, right? Not just that it exists, not that it's just wonderful, um, but also, what are these organizations doing?
It would be
What are
nice
their
just
thoughts?
to see their writing just perfected instead of somebody else writing it. So that, because we don't want them to lose their tone
Right.
per se. We want their part of it in there and not sound like they were born at Oxford and studied 15 years in Cambridge, because we know that's not the case. And
We
then
know that's
we
not the case.
question it
Yeah.
out. You didn't write any of this stuff. And which we've seen too, when people have copied and pasted, they still have a different color font on it and everything. Rather amusing that all of us have experienced.
And I think, that actually just made me think of something else. I'm hoping that what they're creating is different from the word gibberish tools that we've seen the last few years, where students copy and paste their posts or copy and paste their papers into a grammar checker, um, and then what happens is a lot of word salad or a lot of synonyms that really don't make sense, or whatever the case is, in an attempt to sound what they think is academic or collegiate. So I just yeah, I'm very interested to see the development of that. Professor Murray in the chat said the first course at Westcliff should be college writing that teaches how to write academic paper and using APA. We've got writing samples to use as well. No disagreement from me there. I think students really need that foundation. And at another college that I teach for, they changed that requirement before they take my sociology class, and it's very, very clear. Very, very clear. Dr. Johnson said, I could not agree more with you. Once they get good at it, it flows much easier for the rest of their academic journey. That's the challenge, right? Students don't realize that if they don't have that um, foundation is going to help them. Don't avoid those English classes, right? Dr. Broding said, I listen to a lot of podcasts on how faculty are using AI, navigating students using AI. Many of them are requiring students to write a video showing them performing an AI written lesson plan, for example. ways to ensure students are engaging with the material and showing their understanding, even if it did not use AI to help them write something. Actually, is one of the first courses for undergraduate students. Yeah, I actually have this is like these techniques that I'm testing out in a couple classes, um, where it's like remote writing, and it's been very interesting. I feel like right now, as a department, we're just using it to police students. I don't think we're doing it enough with this context of how are we learning the tools, right? Some of it actually has nothing to do with it's just having them avoid. Um, Oral exams will become a necessity to determine what the students have learned and actually know. Yeah, it would have to be live, right? Because we have tools for that now. We can get AI voiceovers. We can create a presentation. I don't have to be here right now, although I love being here. That those words didn't come out right. It doesn't have to be me because I could have actually put a bot here to record and space this entire presentation, and somebody could have just been pressing the button um, to read through the questions, right? But we see the difference, right? We see the difference in having a conversation versus, being able to present. Oh, is it just me? But my volume is all the way up and I can barely hear. It could be my hearing. Am I hard to hear for anybody? I did a little sound check earlier. It might be your computer, Dr. Constant. Um, Check your help us run concerts. Do check. Okay, so Zoom is launching new speaking of tools, um all these different versions. Mine is now dark again, so it keeps giving me new. Check in the mic under the audio settings, a little drop down arrow, and check your full audio settings. Because sometimes it will be turned up on my computer, but not turned up in Zoom. And I don't know when it started doing that, but it did that for me. It's done that to me a couple times. Gotta love Depeche Mode. So moving along, I do want to get to our apps. You know these apps. Yes. So ChatGPT is my favorite. Gemini is for me is fun to play with. Um, obvious now we have obvious reasons. Copilot is Copilot. I don't know if anybody's used Copilot. Um, Not my favorite. I'm still very much in with the Chat GPT because it is kind of the mainstream one. I want to add one more um to this setup though. And the reason why somebody just um sent this one to me like a week and a half ago. Oh, it's up. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Constant. That's the best. That's all I got. Claude.ai. And it's called Talk to Claude. Claude. Um, it's by an organization called Anthropic. If you know better, please tell me how to say that. Um, and their research, it's a company that is focused on AI safety, reliability, interpretability, and steerable AI systems. They sound like Dr. Johnson was talking about, maybe like the kind of company that's maybe a little bit an alternative to open AI. If you actually haven't, please do take a moment sometime over the weekend to Google OpenAI. That's the one who owns ChatGPT. That organization has a lot of controversy around it. Love the music references in NFO yesterday. I actually made a reference to the crash test dummies, and one of the new faculty members actually understood, so it was nice. So thinking about these apps, I do want to share these tips because this is, why we're here. This is what we're thinking about. Really important. Some of them were in the article. Tips on prompt writing and AI experimenting. And I say that, and I use that term with my students as well. AI experimenting. We are experimenting with AI when we're using it. It is not a resource, it is a tool. And in the same way that when I was 15 and I started wanting to work on cars, I experimented with tools. In the same way that when I was, you want to pick up a new instrument, you experiment with it. Call it an instrument, call it a tool. Understand that there are limitations to it. So I want to share some articles here. You can read the tips on the screen there. Many of them, again, were presented in the article. It's important to view AI the right way. So Professor Murray said a SME. an assistant, not a guru, not a teacher. Um, even thinking about the Dr. Johnson's comparison to Wikipedia, those could almost tell you more accurate information, it seems sometimes, now than, on very general subjects than sometimes what ChatGPT comes up with. Being clear and specific, be mindful of ethic considerations up front. So if you are, I read things from different professional groups where teachers are like, I put a student's paper in there and I asked it, did you write this? That worked for a little while last year. It really doesn't work. And there's a lot of ethical considerations around sharing content that in some circles at some universities isn't yours to share. So just kind of thinking about that. And then also keep in mind that anything we do in these tools works, develops the tool, right? That's why they give it to us for free. Um, all of them are available for free, at least some version of them. Use simple language and keep things straightforward. Avoid jargon. Explain constraints though. And this is one tip I actually don't give my students because it's actually one of the ways I check to see if they're using it too much. When they have to write a paragraph and they give me 4 in a discussion post and they outline everything and they summarize everything, and it's like, yep, that's not. But when you're using it, use constraints. And as we can have conversations around this, I think that's one important one that we do want to teach our students, though, just to say. Use open-ended questions. Experiment and converse with the tool. When it's wrong, you heard Dr. Johnson say that's not even an article. It'll apologize, but you're teaching it like, this is what I want, right? I want accurate information. I don't want 2 + 2 = 5. Anticipate misinterpretations, the nice way of saying it, when it's wrong, and adjust for clarity, and go step by step. This is a big one that I have classes where I do work with students using AI activities, and it's really important that they understand that it is not a dump and copy and paste. That is obviously the really bad way that we're seeing, students use it. Encourage AI to explore different perspectives and generate different ideas. So, and you'll see that in some of the resources I'm going to share with you here. So if you have any resources that you've been looking into, if you have tools that you've been using, feel free to pop them in the chat. These are just some that I pulled from my collection. This is a really interesting article again. And also I want to kind of preface this as well, because I know sometimes we have this conversation at different university campuses. Some of these resources may be a little heavy on the K-12 focus. Having said that, there are really some really wonderful, excellent recommendations, especially if you're teaching undergrad students who need help with critical thinking. If you're looking for, as Dr. Broding talked about, active learning possibilities. So just want to share a few articles here. And then the last things I'm going to share are 3 growing repositories. If you are experimenting with AI, one of my favorite things to do, Dr. Brody mentioned podcasts. I love podcasts. And yes, for your undergrad students, a lot of it's going to be necessary. There are some growing repositories of educators. And again, you have to filter these. You have to go, does it apply to me? Does it apply to my students? You have to do all of that work. None of these are references. None of these are, they're resources in the sense of things that you can look into, but they are all, I haven't checked through each of these repositories. What I do find is some very interesting uh, tools in there, recommendations for different AI, different recommendations for using AI. And that Google Docs one I sent you, there's actually a tab where it's nothing but a collection of different prompt writing. It's going to give you some examples. It's going to give you some recommendations, going to give you some activities that you could do with students. And I always encourage faculty to take it one more step ahead. And the only example I have is social science, so I'm going to go ahead and share it. In a social science course that I teach right now, we talk about image and bias. And so we don't use DALL-E, but you can use DALL-E. We use another one that's free for students to generate an image of, and I teach sociology, so we talk about welfare queens. And almost always it's a Black or brown woman, very run down, usually overweight, living off the government system. Then we look at actual data on who is on public assistance, right? We don't judge their reasons. We just look at data from different states and compare. And then we talk about who's creating the tools. We talk about bias. We also talk about policy. We have some really good conversations around policy and image and what that looks like in society. It's a very loose overall general description of something I've done. I think I was only comfortable even coming up with that and using that in class is because I've actually done all that footwork in AI. So if we're avoiding AI, or if we're just waiting to catch students using it, we're not going to get to that point. So that's why I think I'm such a engage with AI. Teaching in higher ed podcasts and international teaching podcasts are great resources on AI use in the contemporary classroom. Love that. Gonna go look for those. I actually really like teaching in higher ed for so many reasons. Faculty Focus is another one. If you do get some articles in your email, if you look up, if you're not getting Faculty Focus magazine, or it's not a magazine, but you know what I mean, newsletter, it's a really good one. Any thoughts on these steps? On any of the links I've shared? I just dumped a whole bunch in there. Dr. Conson?
Yep.
Can I take advantage of having an admin here in the room?
All right.
Yep.
What are your faculty experience like? What are you hearing from faculty when it comes to AI? Are they interested in it? Are they waiting for it to disappear? Are they overusing it?
No, so I don't feel like my faculty, I mean, in the College of Education, I think that we have a range of faculty, but I don't think any of them are sticking their head in the sand, becoming an ostrich and just trying to ignore it. I think that there's a level of frustration, as I think you've heard from Dr. Johnson and perhaps other professors, that, it really could signify this turning away from original work, this allowing this machine learning to learn for me rather than me critically think it through myself. I think that there are professors that have concerns about that.
Yeah.
We in College of Ed, we're finding that plagiarism or the use of it answering the question for them without them going back in and really diving in, rewriting it themselves or thinking about what it said, tends to be copying and pasted at the undergrad level.
Mm-hmm.
At the grad level, we really do tend to see where they may use AI, but at least they're trying to, revise it to have some semblance of them and a connection to it. That's not to say we haven't had the one-off. I did have a doctoral student who really just copy and pasted. And when you had those one-on-one conversations with them and you would say, well, help me understand what you mean by this, they just couldn't really answer. So we do those conversations at all levels. And then we give discretion to professors about what to do about that. Because if the student has not done some original work, hasn't critically been able to think through those ideas on their own, and they just can't justify or provide evidence of it, then, they can take a 0 for that assignment. They can be allowed to redo that assignment. And in the College of Ed, we give discretion around that. We also have some professors that are really keen to AI and are actually implementing it into their curriculum. So, and it's interesting to see what comes of that and how students are reacting to what does it look like when a professor is using it. We really need to make sure, a lot of the times when I have gone to look at how AI is used in the classroom, I seem to get in my queries very K-12 kinds of ways, use it to talk to a character. Well, at the college level, we're not talking to characters, right? We're not reading a piece of literature, at least not at Westcliff. We don't have those classes, we don't have English lit classes. So we have to figure out different ways in which we can engage. And I think one of the things that we could do is teach students the idea of how do you query it best. I know that when I try to use AI and I'm trying to really get it down into really what I'm looking for, it's query after query after query after query. And so building up the stamina in students to be able to go through that process, not take a first answer, not right. And or to kind of do what Dr. Johnson said too. Okay, great. I think I heard even Mary say, but it gives me ideas faster than maybe I could have come up with on my own. But I'm redesigning my Bachelor's of Ed program, for example, redesigning our EDD program, for example. And I may go in and query something in chat, and then I go to Google. I'm still spending hours of time really trying to look at a bunch of different sources for me to come up with something that I think works best for my programs and my students and the students that I want. I want them to choose Westcliff, and here's reasons why I want them. And if they see titles or course descriptions like these, maybe they'll choose us over someone else. And, you know, having an intentional, deliberate practice with that. But it takes a lot of stamina. So I'm not sure, you know, building up stamina in students, teaching them how to query it well. And again, you know, we do have, you know, we have faculty that are looking at the AI score. They know that that AI score in, say, Turnitin isn't necessarily accurate. And then talking to a student, you know, they are giving students zeros, and they are, you know, they are not allowing students to redo some work sometimes. The students really are going to have to, we have to teach students that they're going to have to really be able to, if questioned, answer the questions as if they did that work. So not letting them off the hook and having some sort of student accountability, making sure that when they come to me, that I also support faculty. I'm very supportive of faculty decisions, and I give them a lot of autonomy in the classroom to really look at making 21st century learners today for tomorrow's workplace, right? Because in the workplace, whether we like AI or not, it's being used. So let's not turn a blind eye to it, but let's figure out a way that we can, in academics and higher ed, use it with integrity and accountability, and know that, and the students know that that's how it's going to be handled here. Now, I don't know if that's, you know, I'd like to believe that's across all the colleges, but for me, that's how the College of Ed has been looking at AI. I do think that obviously as AI evolves, the way in which we interact with it will evolve.
Yeah. Really good points there. I think that's been one of the challenges for me and anybody who's here who's tried out some AI activities with students. I'd love to hear your experiences. Trying to teach them to have a long, lengthy conversation instead of just copying and pasting. And to me, I almost compare it to like trying to help them do research, right? Um, we have I've done activities with like annotated bibliographies where we have to have a section where we, you know, say, is this a good resource for our project or not? Trying to do the same thing kind of in a smaller scale with AI conversations, right? Is this really helpful to what? Does it even answer the question that you're trying to ask it? Or do you need to be more specific? Or do you need to just stop using the AI altogether and go back to the textbook and get a different perspective, get a different view? I think that's really important. Oops. Uh, I also love what you said about balancing the students, how we approach students. We want to hold them accountable. We also want to support them. And yeah, I think that at one
Well,
of the
I mean,
colleges, yeah, I got a little slap on the wrist for giving a student a zero who was blatantly using AI, like boldly using AI, right? Like it was just, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, no, I was just going to say, like, so part of it, like, we do need to be student centered, right? Student
Yeah,
centered and student friendly. But in my class, I'm not assigning work that is busy work, right? Like,
sure.
I'm not just assigning something just because I need to fill some time. I'm
Right.
assigning work because it's meaningful. I want them to make meaning from it. And because when they do, that's going to make a difference in what comes next.
Yeah.
And so I need to make sure that they're not just copying and pasting something, or that they haven't thought about it in ways that can have a larger impact on a community, right? If I'm teaching a person to be a teacher, right, then there's some sort of integrity that comes along with what I expect them to do for their students. And if it wouldn't be okay for their students, why is it okay for them to do that to me? But that is kind of a pervasive, right? Like oftentimes we see, if you just, as we go up, teachers say, well, students can't do that. Well, then teachers can behave the same way to an administrator, or an administrator goes to a larger district or executive meeting and they're behaving the same way that they're complaining about their teachers or their students. So, you know, people are people, but how do we balance a student friendly, making meaning, really wanting to make sure that they learn and understand a concept with saying enough's enough, right? You know, this isn't about skirting the system, right? We want you to be a critical thinker. We want you to
Yes.
be,
Yeah.
right, because you need to be a problem solver. We want you
Yep.
to be able to be creative in your approaches because we want unique ideas that come from the idea that you might get from collaborative teams. We want
Right.
you to be able to communicate ideas in ways. Like I'm working on a presentation right now, like how can I communicate this information differently, more effectively, more efficiently? And these are the kinds of skills that we want to give students. And I think that oftentimes we have to learn it ourselves too. We have to model some things.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if I know that students are using AI, I better go in and learn a little bit about AI myself. So there is some responsibility on us too. But
There is, and I think that's one of the things that is really important is I mean, I'll tell my students, Dr. Johnson and I've had this conversation in a few spaces, you know, their motivation for being in the class. Your motivation might not be the motivation that brings you here, but we have a purpose in this class still, right? And kind of, I think Dr. Money's talked about this as well, the transactional nature of education right now. And, you know, I have undergrad students, and one of the first introductions we talk about is like, oh, what brings you to this class? The number of them that are like, it's a requirement, it fills a requirement. Okay, well then what do you hope to get out of it? So now we have to take it a step further and say, go read the syllabus. What do you hope to get out of it? And come up with something specific, because you are here for a purpose. This assignment serves a purpose. I think that's really important. Okay.
so
Oops,
Joni, I just noticed Dr. Money joined us.
yes,
And
Dr. Money's here.
I know we only have 3 minutes, but Dr. Money is one of the faculty members who checked and said, hey, I'm at this conference. I've learned this thing about AI. I'd really like to incorporate in this my class. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I think they're going to do. Are you okay with it? And I was like, absolutely, I'm okay with it. And so I don't know if Dr. Money might want to talk a little bit about some of the learning that she's taken in just this last minute or so.
Yeah,
I hate to put you on
love
the
that.
spot, Jennifer, but it seemed pretty powerful that, you know, you were so struck by that idea that you wanted to make sure it was included.
Yeah, so I'm just taking an online course through MIT about engineering prompts and engineering individual GPTs. And what I wanted to do is to just save some time answering all those like redundant questions that students ask. When is the paper due? When do we have to do this by? What are the due dates? I just created a GPT based off of the syllabus so that students could actually put their question into the GPT for the class and then pull up that information on their own. Because I'm sure as many of you know, we spend a lot of time answering emails from students like, what are the specifications? Can you remind me what this is? When's it due
Right.
again? So I just wanted to cut down some time, and I asked Dr. Constant ahead of time because I had to input that information from the syllabus into the GPT I programmed. Once it goes into the GPT that I programmed, it enters into this vast, you know, AI database of information where information is pulled. So because of privacy and proprietary concerns, I just ran that by her. I'm currently using it in my EDU 350 class, but those students are advanced and are actually excellent students and are on top of their game. So there hasn't been much use for it, but they have liked it and I've gotten good response back from it.
That's awesome. So that's one of my goals is figuring out how to create a GPT. I love that idea, because how many times throughout a term do we tell students it's in the syllabus? It's in the syllabus. It's in the syllabus, right? You answer the question, of course. We always want to answer our students' questions, but reminding them also that it's in the syllabus. If they know they have a resource that maybe they feel is trendy, because I guess maybe somebody might say, well, why would they, you know, why do they need that if they have the syllabus? Well, they're already using these kinds of tools. So if you can actually build that kind of tool, that's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Again, we always want to think about our Capri framework and making learning relevant.